Okay, we are going to be talking about aliens, UFOs, and the Bible. There it is. How about that? And, the question comes up. I actually gave this presentation in a church yesterday. So why would we talk about this in church or in a, creation science venue like this? What is the connection to creation and evolution questions? Why do you want to talk about aliens? Well, people are seeing UFOs. And there's many-fold increase in the sightings of UFOs, so it's in our culture. You've probably heard about it. In fact, I spoke at Northern Illinois University on a lot of neat topics, from genetics to fossils. And then I was invited to speak on this talk, and it doubled the increase of the people, students wanting to hear about UFOs and aliens. We do have increase in the stories, people saying, absolutely, I was abducted by an alien. Seriously. If you get the DVD of this talk, I think I only have one left out there, they actually have interviews with people who insist they were. And then finally, it's just a growing belief in our culture here and across Europe and elsewhere that life on Earth was seeded by aliens. I mean, half the shows on the History Channel anymore seems like it's about ancient aliens, right? So how many of you heard that, And we'll address that a little bit tonight. And that gets right down to the origin of life, creation versus evolution. And that's why I think, besides just the general public interest, that it's worth talking about and why I developed this talk. It's used a lot of other materials, but I'm just going to jump right into it. If you look at the Gallup polls, and people can extrapolate them across the population with some statistical veracity, 20 million Americans claim to have seen a UFO. So some of you may have a story for me later tonight. And then over 4 million Americans claim to have been abducted by aliens. And those are some interesting stories. And then if you go to this worldwide, and it is happening worldwide, 3% of the worldwide population believe they were abducted. So it's worth talking about and seeing what we can really learn about what's going on. There are still hundreds of sightings every day. In fact, tonight, there might be a reporting tomorrow morning of somebody seeing something, whether in a lake in Wisconsin or somewhere else. And I'll just give you a couple examples. Even if most of these things are explained away through some natural cause, there's a big chunk that are not explained. And here's one just recently, in November, just a couple months ago. How many of you heard that the Irish Aviation Authority is opening an investigation to sightings of UFOs by airline pilots? Yeah, a few of you. Therefore, a British Airways pilot contacted the Shannon Air Traffic Control on November 5th, 2018, and reported there was something moving so fast. And they asked, are there any military exercises going on around here? Is there some other explanation of why we're seeing some lights moving across faster than we are going as we approach Ireland, coming from, I think they were flying from New York to London, but they're going by Ireland. And then a Virgin Airlines plane reported the same thing, multiple objects following the same sort of trajectory. Those, credible professional airline pilots are reporting things. And you may have heard of these things in the past as well, right? And then more recently, just after Christmas, there was this article going across the internet, a rise in mysterious TR-3B UFO sightings. And they think it was a panic over some top secret military plans. But look at what they're saying about them. Some claim that these lights, which are in the form of a triangle, are that the US military is reverse engineering alien technology. In other words, Area 51 is acting up again, and we've got some ideas. Others claim these are actual UFOs flown by aliens visiting Earth. And these sightings of a triangle UFO configuration have been in Russia, North Carolina, and Kansas, all in the last 6 months. And here's one of the pictures. Somebody actually got their phone out, took a little video clip. So it's kind of a loose triangle, but these are definite lights that flash across the sky and then disappear. And people are reporting them. So that's why I think we want to address them. And I'm just happy to be with you here tonight. Thank you, Ken, for inviting me, even though I'm just a poor substitute for someone else. I know you told me that, but that's okay. How many of you heard of Alien Intrusion, the book or the DVD by Gary Bates? So I used some of his material. I've got 3 copies, I think, of the book left out there if you're interested in getting more of this. And the DVD is a 2-hour documentary where they interview some of these abductees. Anyway, there's Gary Bates, and then he has been the only creationist speaker invited to speak at the annual Roswell convention. That's pretty cool. I've never been invited. How about you, Ken? Anyway, Gary Bates is the president of Creation Ministries International, and because of all this activity, like I mentioned, he also researched a lot of this and got into it and actually interviewed people who claim to have been abducted for that documentary and his book. There he is. He's petting one of the visiting aliens at the convention right there. And then there's Dr. Hawking, the late Professor Dr. Hawking. How many remember him? And yeah, everybody kind of remembers him. You know, in the midpoint of his career as a brilliant physicist, he did say he couldn't not allow, or he had to allow for the possibility that God existed. But then later in life, he got very, very adamant that God cannot exist. God didn't have time in the millisecond of the inflationary period of the Big Bang to create. That's something of what he said just a few years ago. But he became very adamant atheistic. I think some of his buddies, like Dawkins, may have tapped him on the shoulder or whatever, get his attention and said, you shouldn't really admit that God might exist. And he didn't. But he also said some things about aliens. He said, by chance, if aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. The aliens might simply raid Earth for resources and move on. Well, how many of you heard that theme in many science fiction movies? I mean, that a lot of science. I don't know if all of you go to movies, but I love science fiction movies. When I was young, junior high and senior high and into college, I read a lot of science fiction books, and I'll mention that early. But I knew they were fiction, right? But this is the theme. If you remember the Independence Day movie, and then the more recent one, yeah, that was the theme. The aliens were coming here to raid us, get some fancy resource. They didn't care if they wiped us all out. In fact, they kind of wanted to get us out of the way. And that's the theme of very popular blockbuster Hollywood movies. And Hawking is saying the same thing. And then he says, aliens almost certainly exist, but humans should avoid making contact. One day we might receive a signal from a planet like Lisi 832c, but we should be wary about beaming back a response to any advanced life form. Ooh, because they'll come and take all our resources, right? But then other scientists, and then Hawking a little bit later, within a year or late, actually reversed course and said, well, maybe we should talk to them because it's probably too late to try and hide ourselves in this little corner of the Milky Way. He said, well, according to many senior scientists, he didn't say this, but others now say it, it's too late to consider whether we should send such transmissions or not because we've been doing it for decades. And in fact, tonight, decades after the first transmissions of Gilligan's Island and Andy Griffith and I Love Lucy, the aliens in Alpha Centauri are probably watching that. And no, we're here. I just wonder what they think of when they show the I Love Lucy episode with the chocolate factory bands, remember? It's the most watched episode of a TV show ever. But you young people, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, some do. Cool, but the aliens are watching that and they know we're here and they're kind of scratching their head. Are they all like Lucy? Well, ufology, that actually is a word. It's a field of study of the UFO phenomena. And the modern phenomenon, it happened before, but the current phenomenon started in 1947. A businessman, Kenneth Arnold, was flying a light plane over Mount Rainier. He says he saw saucer-shaped discs as if they were skipping across the water. Lights in the sky that he could see from his little plane, and they were skipping across, and then they disappeared. And he radioed, is anything going on? Nobody else detected these. But his description made nationwide news. And the phrase that he used to describe them, saucer-shaped discs, that's when flying saucers got into our vernacular. Since right after World War II, we've been talking about flying saucers, and the whole thing moved on from there. In fact, that same year, because of was also what's called the Roswell incident. I know most of you don't remember that, much too young, but in 1947, besides the Roswell incident, which made news, there were 850 other sightings suddenly of these lights going across the sky, UFOs. So that's when it really began to take off, and people noticed these things. 10 years later, in 1957, at Holman Air Force Base in New Mexico, a nurse working at the Mescalero Indian Reservation, Ella Louise Fortune, she saw something over the airbase, got out of her car, had her little, I don't know, Polaroid or a little Kodak type camera at the time, and took this picture. And it's been in UFO lore ever since, and nobody's figured out what it is. It was made with real film. She had it developed, there it is. And so that was made a sensation in 1957. And then we go forward almost a couple decades, 1976. How many of you remember Jimmy Carter's first run for president? Well, during his campaign of 1976, in an interview, somehow the question of what he had seen as a governor of Georgia came up, and he said, it was the darndest thing I've ever seen. It was big, it changed colors, and it was about the size of the moon. We watched it for about 10 minutes, but none of us could figure out what it was. One thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen unidentified flying objects in the sky. So that also made big news. Here you have a prominent US governor of a big state, and then in the presidential campaign admits, I saw this, and none of us could figure out what it was. Apparently other people with him. So in his run for president, he made a pledge. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and scientists. I'm convinced that UFOs exist because I've seen one. Quote unquote from President candidate Jimmy Carter. So people, might have influenced a few people out there. But the interesting thing is, as he did become president, nothing new was ever released. And all that did was people who believe in conspiracy theories, especially on this topic, it just fueled the fires even more. I mean, they just added, okay, yeah, he learned something from the Pentagon of what they got in Roswell, and he's not going to tell us. It was too scary. But at the same time, about that year, 1976, 77, Popular Mechanics ran a short article about what Jimmy Carter said he saw. And they said, don't worry, folks, it was just Venus. Venus in the evening time is pretty bright, and it has, in fact, been confused for a flying saucer. There are actually confirmation where people said they saw something, but it just turned out to be the planet Venus. Their evening star and the morning star, very bright. However, Venus, no matter how good you see it, never gets anything close to the size of the moon. And that's what they said. And so they tried to just, dismiss it with an explanation, but really, it's never been explained, and not to the extent that covers the full description of what they said. So, this thing is going on, and as you saw, some of the newer headlines, it continues. How many of you know that the History Channel is even running a TV special series called Project Blue Book? That was the name of the official US government investigation into UFO sightings, Project Blue Book. So, connections to the evolution, atheism, secularism, and of course, the alternative view of creation. What's this connection? Well, we're going to do 4 things. We're going to look at 4 things. A lot of people, as I mentioned, believe that if life evolved on Earth, and there's so many stars, there must be so many billions of planets, surely on 1 or 2 of them, life must have evolved elsewhere. So we'll look briefly at that topic. We'll also look, could there be other planets with conditions just right for any chance of life evolving? And then the third thing we'll look at was if these are physical aliens, if they are really aliens that evolved somewhere else, then they must be able to travel vast distances in a reasonable amount of time. By reasonable, I mean, maybe a few decades or whatever. Or since they've seen Gilligan's Island, right? They're coming here to check it out, help them get off the island. But the question is this possible? Can physical aliens travel vast distances in a reasonable amount of time? And do they have physical spaceships? Is that really possible? If they are aliens, physical aliens, not only do they have to be physical beings that evolved somewhere else and come here, they've got to come in a spaceship of some type, right? Maybe it's got the technology of the Starship Enterprise. I don't know, but they've got to be real ships that travel through interstellar space. And we'll just look briefly at these 4 topics. So let's just jump into the first one. If life evolved on Earth, could it have evolved somewhere else? NASA and many famous scientists believe this. Now, when NASA had all the success, and I was young when we landed on the moon and loved it, I got up early to watch Gemini and Apollo spacecraft take off, the shuttles. But then they kind of said, well, it's not really worth going all that much money to the moon, and we've already got some moon rock, and it's, not that valuable, other than it's from the moon. And so they got into this thing for a while. Some government money went into what's called SETI, and I think there's still private money going into it, not so much government money today, but it's a big deal. How many of you know what SETI stands for? Search. There it is. And so this is a big deal. They've got these giant arrays of radio telescopes out west, and really are trying to determine if we can pick up a signal. Maybe they've got the sequel to Gilligan's Island and I Love Lucy beaming back at us, only with the aliens in it. I don't know. But really, all they're looking for is a basic signal. And the governments have spent billions of dollars on it. I don't think much today. But then there's people helping them. Up in Wisconsin, I saw a car. It said SETI vehicle number 1293. And they had all these antennae on top of it. And it was real. I have a picture at the end. And I actually gave this talk up there, and he came. They said, why do you have that car? Well, there are people who are helping SETI. And he says, if we can pick up a signal, we'll send it to them, let them analyze it. Or also just to raise awareness that we need to be on the lookout, okay? So if you've seen a UFO, you can come tell him and he'll report it. And there's people doing this. And the big arrays have scanned 28 million radio frequencies per second for 40 years. We've been really looking for it. And really, we're looking for a coded signal, but no one has ever found one. They're looking for something that's not random static or noise. Something that'll go beep, 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 or something like that, and repeat itself that cannot be just simple randomness, okay? And to date, they've never found one, but wait, I forgot. They did find one in 1967. They picked up a signal that went beep, 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 and that is not random. So they really got onto it, and they called the source of that signal LGM1. Does anybody know what LGM stands for? Little green men. Seriously, that's what they called it. Because at that time, they thought aliens, the most popular picture of aliens was little green men. So they actually called it, in the literature, little green men, or LGM-1. Well, a little more investigation, people were looking at it, and what it turned out to be is a pulsar. A pulsar is a rapidly rotating neutron star. And because it has some variation in which side the signal of a radio signal from the neutrons is going out, it actually sends it out as it rotates, and it's rotating quickly. So on this one side of the neutron star, the signal is much stronger. And every time it spins around and then faces to where we are, we hear that louder beep. And then it spins around and we hear another beep. And it spins around again and we hear another beep. So the analysis was, no, it wasn't an LGM-1 thing. They now call it CP1919, and you can look that up if you like. It did emit some type of pulse radio waves, but it had a natural source of a rotating neutron star. But here's an interesting question. SETI's whole point is finding coded information. It might not be real of any note or any type of information we can understand, but it's not random. It's some type of coded signal that tells us there's an intelligence behind it, and not just random noise. That's what they're looking for, right? So if you applied that logic, why don't we do that to other things that we have found that's non-human? How about DNA? Ken's talked about that. You've heard other talks about it. DNA has been called the most complex packed information molecule in the universe. It's amazing. And that's why DNA is such strong evidence for intelligent design. All you have to do is follow the same logic as the SETI folks. You've got non-human written information or a repeating code that does something intelligent. In our case, it makes you. Or the DNA for a parrot makes parrots. And we've learned just how complex that packet of information is. And they're thinking a beep, beep, beep might be sign of intelligence. Wow, DNA is truly a sign of super intelligence. It's coded information, and that means there is an intelligence out there. Okay, well, you maybe know about that, but that's an important thing to think about when somebody tells you about SETI. Well, yeah, we've got non-human coded information, DNA, and it's in all of us. Now, speaking of DNA, the helix structure of DNA was discovered over 50 years ago. It was a very big, it was actually a race between several groups of scientists, and Crick and Watson were the first ones to actually identify it as a double helix structure. But Dr. Crick was a very ardent atheist and very anti-Christian. But he did realize the design conclusion, the exact thing I was just talking about. He looked at this DNA helix, and even before we could map it and understand just how complex it really is, he already then realized the design conclusion, that this could not have happened by chance. So, did he stop his anti-Christian views? Because he realized this could not happen by chance. No way. And he did call it a miracle. In fact, in some of his papers, you can pick up the signal that it's very clear that evolution could not happen, no matter how long you prepare. He basically says that evolution is statistically impossible on Earth. So guess what he said? They said, aliens did it. That's where panspermia really got started. Now at the time, it didn't really catch on. Oh yeah, sure, aliens came here and seeded life, okay, right? In fact, but it's picked up ideas. It's really picked up. I've seen parents show me a junior college science textbook. And as they talk about the origin of life and how it must have came up as some primeval soup, there's also a column next to it that has a little article that says, many scientists think that ancient life forms came to Earth as aliens and dropped the building blocks of life. In other words, they traveled around the Earth, looked at it was still pretty early in its supposed evolutionary story. They flushed the toilet and then they left. And those biomaterials came down, and that's what we evolved from. I'm serious, that's in books. And it's getting even more popular. Here's another article from, I don't think this one's not that old. Life's housing may have come from space. And there we got some of our ancient alien ancestors, right? But it's serious. And this origin of life issue, I know Ken could talk for hours on that one alone, and I've got some talks. But William Bonner, back in 1995, an organic chemist at Stanford, and he was one of the world's homochiral researcher. And he said, terrestrial explanations, talking about the origin of life, are impotent and non-viable. In other words, like Crick, Dr. Crick, he says, it couldn't have happened here. Wow. Now, how many of you heard of Sir Fred Hoyle, famous British astronomer and mathematician? Well, he said, I'm a mathematician, and in the late 90s and so on, we were already figuring out a little bit about DNA, and we're getting the electron microscope, we're getting many more good ideas of what the inside of the cell, a living cell, looks like. And he said, well, what are the odds that this could have happened by accident? What are the odds that all these amino acids got together and made, a complex protein? And then you need not just one protein, but I need a whole nother set of amino acids getting together to make another protein, and so on and so on. He started calculating it. Then he stopped when he got to a very big number. He said, the likelihood of the spontaneous formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number with 40,000 knots after it. Enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. There was no primeval soup, neither on this planet nor any other. And if the beginnings of life were not random, they must therefore have been the product of purposeful intelligence. Wow. Now, he was an atheist when he started this. And he said, guys, I'm looking at the science. I'm looking at the math, the statistics. I can't be an atheist anymore. Amen. I can't. There has to be purposeful intelligence. Don't know. In fact, I doubt if he ever became a Christian, but he stopped being an atheist and he was a deist. He said, God exists. This could not have happened. It's too complicated. And that was in the 90s, in the 80s even. You come forward today and the complexity of DNA has gotten even more amazing. So yeah, the chance that life evolved on Earth is next to nothing. Crick would then decide it would happen from somewhere else. And some of you may have heard Dawkins in the Expelled movie say, well, the aliens came. And then, who's the star of that, the comic? Ben Stein says, well, where did those aliens evolve from? Well, maybe from other aliens. But you're pushing the can down the road and you've only got so much time. If the universe is 13.7 billion years and it took 10 billion years to evolve here, or 10 billion years for the sun just to evolve, and you need all these billions of years, and the aliens came here, 3 billions of years ago, and life first popped up, you're hitting a hard stop on how many aliens you can kick it down the road to, even in their own timeline. They must, therefore, have been the product of purposeful intelligence. And yet, you still see articles like this. 2005, 10 years later, planetary researchers are sure life is out there. And basically what they're doing, and I've had people tell me, intelligent people who attend a church of some type and believe in God, but they're convinced in evolution, and then they look at the number, we have 100 billion galaxies, and each has 100 billion stars. Well, you'd have to be arrogant to think that life only came on this planet. And so they're sure it was out there. And some people, an astronomer named Drake, tried to put an equation to it. It's called the Drake equation. Maybe you've heard of it. And he's trying to determine N, the number of civilizations in our galaxy where you might be able to expect life that's able to communicate, to send that beep, 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 beep signal, right? It's be able to do that. And there's basically, in the Drake equation, there's 7 numbers or very tiny percentages and a few big numbers to give it even a chance. And I'm going to look at 2 of them with you real quick. R is the rate of star formation in our galaxy. That's the first one. And then a little over here in yellow is the FL, the fraction of the above, which actually go on to develop life. So what do we just look at? The origin of life is 1 out of 10 to the 40,000th power. Even if you got 100 billion times 100 billion stars, you multiply that times 1 times 10 to the negative 40, you've got nothing. But anyway, star formation is one of his parameters. Can stars just pop into existence? And part of the Big Bang Theory says there's just these gas nebulas out there, maybe light years in diameter across. And then gravity starts sucking them down. They get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then gravity really takes hold and they get even tinier and tinier. And then poof, they ignite with hydrogen fusion and become a star. That's the popular theory. Gas and dust clouds. However, in ordinary physics, especially in a vacuum of space, what do they want to do?
Expand.
They want to expand. Walt over there actually looked up his thermodynamics textbook, which you could do anybody, start running through the equations, the strength of PV equals nRT, what gas pressure wants to do, and what gravity wants to do. And when these are dust clouds, these clouds want to expand at a rate that's 64 to 100 times greater than gravity will suck them in. Stellar evolution is not real. Contracting gas heats up, and it could heat up if they did get a little bit denser, but then they want to expand. And there's nothing there to hold them in, right? Unless it's the hand of God just squeezing down the hydrogen he made and says, I want a star here, I'm going to have some stars there, and he does it for 100 million times per second, and he's done. He created the stars also. See, the idea of a stellar nursery, if that was true, why don't we ever see it? Now, they show pictures of the space, like here's the Orion Nebula, or the Orion, if you would prefer that. They say this is a stellar nursery. There's enough material there to make 1 million stars. Well, that's true. There's material there. There's gases. These are giant clouds. But don't ever let anybody tell you we've seen it happen. We have no video of a star being born except the Barbra Streisand movie. Right? What we have are still pictures that take hours to develop, and then you got a couple of bright lights there, and that could be a star in front of it, or even behind it, or in the middle of it, but it doesn't mean it just flickered into existence. We have no proof. In fact, they will admit, we have no idea of how a star can form other than this theory, which physics says doesn't work, and yet they want to believe it does happen, and it's happening all the time. In fact, there are so many stars out there, we should see a new star flickering out in space somewhere every hour. And we've never seen one. Don't let anybody tell you that. This is Charles Lotto, Frank Hsu, astronomers, in an article in Science magazine. They said, despite numerous efforts, we have yet to directly observe the process of stellar formation. The origin of stars represents one of the fundamental unsolved problems of contemporary astrophysics. There are scientists who will admit, yeah, we kind of think that's our story, but it's a story. We have no evidence. None whatsoever. In fact, physics says it doesn't happen. So, are there other Earth-like planets? How many of you have read the book or seen the movie The Privileged Planet? When it comes to looking at this question, is it possible that not only do we have sun-like stars popping into existence, which we have not seen, could they even have Earth-like planets or something similar to us? Remember the Star Trek episode with the lizard-like creature? That's one of the classics. I was a kid, I liked it. And so they got this lizard-like creature, and he's got a duel with Captain Kirk. Well, maybe something caused lizards to become the foremost creature on a planet somewhere. That's what they want to believe. But have we found anything close to what we call home planet Earth, the privileged planet, there's something called the anthropic principle, and there are over 100 parameters that are just right that make life even possible on this planet. Not just the abundance of water, but we're in the right zone. We're not too close to Venus, where it would be too hot, and we're not too close to Mars, where it'd be too cold, and so on. We have the right spin, the right size moon, we have everything, lots of things. And so as they're realizing, and we're learning about DNA, and we're learning about all these principles of life, if it's impossible, according to them, for life, or most scientists, for life to have started on Earth, why wouldn't we make the same conclusion about life on any other planet, no matter how Earth-like it might be? And really, every once in a while, maybe you've seen the headlines, they say, oh, we found an Earth-like planet. And just, I think a year ago, they said they had maybe 7 candidates around one star. Well, slowly, all 7 got eliminated from possibility. Most planets that we can identify are big gaseous planets like Uranus, Neptune, and maybe even Jupiter. Impossible for life of any kind that we could imagine even. And they're all very close to their suns, far closer than Venus. And then a lot of these planets that are found, sometimes they just turn out to be double stars. In fact, most of the stars you see in the heaven are double stars. 2 stars going around each other. If there was a planet spinning around that system, there would be times when it would be extremely hot and extremely cold because you don't have the consistent heat radiation from 2 different stars that you're trying to go around. So it doesn't work. Really, if you look at the Drake equation and you want it to make sense of it, and you start plugging in the opportunities, could there be life? Could there be real planets that sustain life? Could they have gone on and become intelligent enough to send us beep, beep, beep signals? The end is really a big fat 0. All you need is one parameter in there with either 0 or 1 out of 10 to the 40,000th power. And no matter how many stars and galaxies you want to throw into it, it still comes down to nothing. So no, I don't believe that aliens could have evolved, formed, and developed a super civilization anywhere. And there's a lot of other reasons for that, but just looking at some of these parameters, it just doesn't work for them. Nobody, until you start putting numbers on paper, a lot of people don't want to believe that. Okay, well, the third thing I mentioned, that if there are aliens, if you got past all these other problems, well, could they travel vast distances in a reasonable amount of time? And we're talking pretty far distances. It's not just a little few days journey from Mars when we're close to it, but it's long distances just to come from Alpha Centauri. So we also know now that space is full of dust and particles. Tiny little bits are out there. And if you could travel fast enough for interstellar travel, hitting just one of these particles is like several tons of TNT going off in your ship. And you could say, shields up, Captain Zulu. Well, that's just imagination. And you only need one particle to slip through. And then we'll talk about it. What about the energy requirements? See, at light speed, even if you could get to the speed of light, even one particle getting through would destroy any sized spaceship, particularly the ones that blow up the White House in the Independence Day movie. And then there's the energy requirements, as I just alluded to. If you wanted to propel a 1-pound ball, just a little 1-pound ball, that anything close to light speed, and it would still take eons to get here, it would require the energy of 20 hydrogen bombs just to start. And then you would need an equal amount of energy to slow down. Maybe that's what those flashing lights are. The aliens came by and they don't have enough fuel to stop. See, otherwise you would impact not just pieces of stardust, but you could impact asteroids, comets, things. You'd have to be able to have the energy to navigate through all that. Even if you had a warp factor and you wanted to go visit these specimens on planet Earth, you would need immense amounts of energy, not just to get here, but then to stop and control. You can imagine all the technology you want, but even then, you still gotta follow the laws of physics. You gotta, we've got cell phones, things that people 80 years ago would think is impossible. But they're based on the laws of physics. Whether it's, solid state electronics, these are all things we figured out and learned the properties of various metals and ceramics and other things that we can do to control tiny little electronic signals. But they follow the laws of physics. You would still, aliens, if they're going to be in this universe, still have to do that. Now, even a long time ago, a great science fiction writer, I read many of his books, Isaac Asimov. Have you read some of his books? Okay, well, he is known for a lot of good books. He loved writing about aliens and interstellar travel and, put in the coordinates for Alpha Centauri, XYZ, Planet 3, and we're there. But he admitted this. He said, the energy requirements for interstellar travel are so great that it's inconceivable to me that any creatures piloting their ships across the vast depths of space would do so only in order to play games with us over a few decades. If they want to make contact, they'd make contact. And if not, they would just save their energy and go elsewhere. So a great science fiction writer admits he didn't believe in aliens. It's just fun writing about them and reading, which I did. I admit it, okay. Did you hear that? I loved Star Trek. I was one of the early followers when I was in high school when it first came out. And you could say, Scotty, give me warp factor 6. Aye, aye, sir. Scotty, give me warp factor 10. Captain, the engines can't take it. They can't. They can't. See, traveling at warp speed. Einstein said you cannot travel faster than light speed. Well, you would need infinite mass and energy. That's what it turns out, according to the theory of relativity, which is still a valid theory. You're not going to get a ship that big over the Empire State Building or the White House or anything. I'm sorry. You still got to follow the law of physics. Warp speed, wormholes, all these ideas are fun for a movie and science fiction, but interstellar travel in any realistic amount of time is not possible. Okay? The last item I mentioned was real aliens visiting us in these real spacecraft. Physical aliens. Now, some people believe we've actually got bodies of them from the Roswell incident of 1947. A flying saucer crashed, alien bodies were taken from the wreckage and hidden in Area 51. How many have seen movies about Area 51, okay? Yeah, we got a lot of people admitting that, that's good. Well, the whole Roswell incident was actually debunked within a matter of days, but it took on a life of its own. Movies, stories about this thing went on for decades, and you still have movies going about it. It wasn't an Independence Day, they all meet at Roswell, right? Same thing. Well, the main promoter of a particular movie where they did an alien autopsy was a guy named Jesse Marcel. Jesse Marcel had a history of fraud. And it was even revealed that he faked his military record to get a little bit of credibility with some of his sponsors. They made this movie. They made a movie of an alien autopsy. You could probably still find it on YouTube today. I haven't looked for it. It would be too gooey for me. But they made this movie and they sold it, and people actually watched it. It was portrayed as very real and had some very powerful images of some scientists doing an autopsy on a dead alien. And they even submitted a piece of the film that they used to make the movie, and they submitted it to Kodak, and Kodak admitted, yeah, this is our film from the 1940s. But the piece that was submitted to Kodak only had some of the header material at the beginning of this supposed documentary, nothing of the alien autopsy. Nothing of the alien autopsy. And then later, not much later, of course, nothing was given to Kodak, and then later it was shown to be all a lie. One of the actors who played this in this movie, as one of the scientists, came forward and said, yeah, we faked it. He debunked it himself, and it's been called one of the biggest hoaxes ever. They made this little short film for money, something that Mr. Marcel was known for, any kind of gimmick. And then there's Project Mogul, the actual Roswell incident where people saw this little alien spacecraft actually on the ground. Well, Mogul was a secret project by the US Air Force to cluster a bunch of weather balloons in balsa wood box with a camera in it using 1947 technology. Remember, we didn't send a satellite into space until 1960 and the Russians in 1959. I think I got those years right. So we didn't have satellites looking down at the Russians, seeing what they were doing. We were worried about them developing an atomic bomb, which at that time we were the only ones who had it. So we were trying to spy on them. And this idea came up, well, weather balloons, they go up really high, nobody can shoot them down, nobody can hardly see them, pick them up. So they thought, take a bunch of weather balloons, get a little box, and put a cameras in it, get it all timed just right, release it somewhere around the edge of the Soviet Union where the winds would blow it over, where we think they might be doing something secretive, have it take the pictures, and if we get enough of them, we think we might recover it after it flies over the Soviet Union. That was the idea. And that's all we had. We didn't have satellites taking pictures all the time. So they wanted to monitor it. It was an Air Force idea to detect the Russian activities. And obviously, in the 1940s and early 50s, the Air Force would never admit they had this kind of project to spy on the Soviets. So it took on a life of its own. And people described the silver foil like one of those flying saucer things. But it was just covering the balsa wood. And then they had these alien hieroglyphics on it. And it was actually from a toy company tape called Alien Hieroglyphics. Somebody in the Air Force lab decided it'd be cool to tape it together with this stuff. And that's all it was. It was a secret project of the Air Force. However, we do have pictures of lights in the sky. We have eyewitnesses. 90% turn out to be man-made with reasonable explanations. Weather balloons, all kinds of stuff. Another aircraft that we didn't know about. But that leaves 10%. And we're talking about thousands of sightings here. Well, of the remainder, 30% are actually Venus, which I told you about. People do get that confused with a possible UFO. So if 30% of the remaining 10, that gives you another 3, 90 plus the 3, that leaves 7% that's unexplained. And what about them? What about them? We have no viable explanation, and we do have pictures. Sometimes they're moving fairly quickly in a line. And we know they travel through wherever they are quickly, fast, just like the airline pilots just saw a couple months ago. And then they make amazing 90-degree turns. They go zip, zip, and then they're gone. Now, if this was a real spacecraft, we would hear sound, we would pick something up even before they turned on their cloaking technology and see them for a while when they were visible. And we don't. But people see them. They travel through the atmosphere without making a sound. You know, you're defying the laws of physics. But here's an interesting clue. People who have seen these things and testified to their veracity, some of them became Christians later in life, and they never saw anything like it again. Just a little bit of clue at this point. This is a professor who's actually been, studying this kind of stuff, and in a magazine he said, research has shown that people who are not affiliated with any church, but claim they are religious, are particularly susceptible to the possible existence of aliens or extraterrestrials. For them, ufology is a substitute religion. There's a spiritual dimension maybe going on. How much time do I have?
6 minutes late, but we have Q&A time, so whatever you need.
So this is Dr. Jacques Vallée. How many of you heard of the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? Sure, most of us have. It's kind of a fun movie. I know I saw it. You got that signal, right? Whatever it was, I don't know. Anyway, this Jacques Vallée, who is a ufologist, he's studied these things, he was a consultant on the movie Close Encounters, he says this: that what takes place through close encounters with UFOs is control of human beliefs, control of the relationship between our consciousness and physical reality, and that this control has been enforced throughout history, and that it's now of secondary importance that it should now assume the form of sightings of space visitors. In other words, as they interview these people, they understand that they are coming under some type of control, maybe like hypnosis. They're losing control, their will. They want to move their hands or get up, and they can't. They feel physically constrained. And then they feel these other things going on around them. Little kids are here tonight, I won't tell you what some of those are, most of them actually. But he says this has been going on throughout history. We've got testimony going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And now it's just taking the form of alien space visitors. How many of you heard of Men in Black? Another fun movie with at least 2 sequels. John Keel was the author, the guy behind that term, Men in Black. And he actually became an expert in ufology, studying what we know about UFO sightings and so on. Now, John Keel initially sought to explain these things as real extraterrestrial visitors. He really thought, there's too many of these things, there must be some UFOs out there. But then he abandoned this idea, his whole hypothesis that they were real aliens. And in his 3rd book, UFOs Operation Trojan Horse, he published it in 1970, he linked UFOs to supernatural concepts such as monsters, ghosts, and demons. Now, this guy at this time was not a Christian, but his own research led him to this. He used the term ultra-terrestrials, not extraterrestrial. They were ultra, as if from another dimension, to describe the UFO occupants he believed to be non-human entities capable of taking on whatever form they want. Spiritual beings that could take on any form they want. Have you heard of anything that might sound like that? This is John Keel, not me. And he was an expert in this topic. He said the devil and his demons can, according to literature, manifest themselves in almost any form and can physically imitate anything from angels to horrifying monsters with glowing eyes. Strange objects, entities materialize, dematerialize in these stories, just as the UFOs and their splendid occupants appear and disappear. They walk through walls and perform other supernatural feats. John Keel goes on. Look out for the alien. The devil, okay, I already told you that one. The manifestations and occurrences described in this imposing literature are similar, if not entirely identical, to the UFO phenomenon itself. Victims of demonomia or possession suffer the very same medical, emotional symptoms as the UFO contactees. Something strange is going on. Even if you don't want to believe in demons, something strange and ultra-terrestrial is going on. He says the UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely variations of an old demonological phenomenon. Now, this guy believed in real aliens, but as he studied the literature from today and the stories of actual alien abductees and compared it to what was going on in maybe even the Middle Ages, and realized, supposedly demons can take the form of anything they want. And what they're doing, apparently, is taking on the form of what the culture expects to see. So today, we accept to see aliens. Our culture does, anyway. I'm sure you and I don't, but no, our culture does expect that. You take a poll of millennials out there, and they really believe aliens exist. Now, in the 1950s and 60s, we thought they were little green men. Today, the modern image of an alien, if you watch the movies, is of these tall, slender grays. They're actually called the grays, with the big bug-eye eyes. And that's how some of these things are appearing to people today. That's how they are appearing, whatever the culture expects. So according to Keel, I think it makes sense. If this is demons in the Middle Ages, they would appear with the way people would expect. And in those days, that was fairies, goblins, and trolls. Again, maybe 95% could be explained of just imagination or something else in the forest. But you got 5%. How many of you heard of Grimm's fairy tales? Before they were Disney-fied, they were very dark stories. Again, most of them could be explained or just imagination. But there's too many, according to what Keel thinks, is that had something dark and demonic going on. So the aliens of today could just be what he says, minor variations of the old demonological phenomenon. They're just appearing the way the culture expects. I have to tell you this story. Joe Jordan. Joe is a national research director for MUFON in South Korea. MUFON is a very real organization. They had headquarters in South Korea, but they're all over the United States too, and you can even go to their website. Just Google MUFON, which stands for the Mutual UFO Network. It's the world's largest clearinghouse for UFO investigations and reports. You want to find out if you had any alien or UFO sightings in your areas, just go on their website and you might find something. Well, he was like I said, a director of research, and he and others at MUFON were examining what was really happening to these people claimed to be abducted by aliens, and he started looking at it very carefully. One of the things he discovered that was consistent across the research was that these abductions were being halted by people who called out in the name of Jesus Christ. And he goes, well, a lot of the people at MUFON realized this, and they just dismissed it, maybe because they didn't like the way it believed, where it was heading. But he really started to see that born-again Christians who were practicing their faith seemed to be generally immune to such experiences. So he's a good researcher, and he talked about the other MUFON people, but they were ignoring that. It's just a coincidence, right? Well, like a good researcher, he starts going after it, so he went to a Bible study. He was trying to figure out, okay, what is it about these Christians that aliens don't like? That's what he said. Well, he got into the Word of God. And the Word is sharper than any two-edged sword. It's true. And after he realized what was going on, that this was a spiritual phenomenon, not extraterrestrials, Joe became a born-again Christian. He accepted Christ as his Savior, and he's never seen an alien since. Tell you quickly my own story. I was a young Christian, became a Christian at University of Illinois, studied the Bible more than any other engineering book in my 5 years when I got my master's degree. And then I went off to work for John Deere, and I lived in northern Iowa. Early 1978, less than a year out of school, I had a roommate in a mobile home who had extra room, and I got really cheap rent. And he was a good Christian friend, and I worked for about a year and a half until I got another place to live. In the middle of that time, in early 1978, he was not there. I remember getting ready for bed in my little room, with all my books around me, and I just had this terrible feeling of evil. I don't know if any of you have encountered such a thing, but I just had this overwhelming, intense feeling of evil. It was horrible. Now, I didn't see anything move. I didn't see anything crazy. I had no visions. It was just something evil is around here. And so I prayed and went to bed. No visions, no problems. Woke up in the morning, turned on the radio, hear the news, and that night, the next morning news reports talked about alien sightings all over northern Iowa and southern Minnesota that very night. Coincidence? I don't know. But this is the closest I've ever gotten to an alien, and that's what I found. So final conclusions, 93% cannot be explained by natural events. What about the remainder? Well, the evolution of life somewhere else is not possible. They're not physical aliens. Could they do interstellar travel to get here? No, it's not plausible. What are they? Well, you've already picked up on it. These are interdimensional spiritual beings, most likely fallen angels, appearing as the culture expects. And we live in a culture that's becoming increasingly non-Christian. And I'll show you some quick statistics if I can. So anybody, all ages, especially young people, be careful what you play with.
Amen.
My wife tells me when she was a teenager, they'd have slumber parties, and they would all stand in the mirror doing some type of chant. I'm not going to tell you what. And they did that a couple of times, and then they saw something and got the bejeebies scared out of them. When I talked about this some other time, a lady said they did the same thing at a slumber party, and she's never done anything. Others have played with Ouija boards, and then saw something, and they never did it again. Be careful what you play with, because I think it is something there. The Bible talks about demons. Jesus talked about demons, fallen angels. And so as we look at what's going on through Hollywood movies and our culture, are we being set up for an arrival of aliens that are really fallen angels? And are they going to offer to help us achieve world peace? All we have to do is use a little of their technology and let them help us form a one world government? Ooh. I believe we could be being set up for that. I don't know. I'm not making a prediction. I'm just saying the pattern fits at this point. How many of you know that the Catholic Church does exorcisms?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, something like 15 years ago, there were only 5 priests in the United States that were authorized to do exorcisms. When families just gave up all hope and called somebody to do an exorcism on their child. Today, there's over 100 priests being trained. They cannot keep up with the demand. Wow. Something is happening in our culture. More and more people are coming onto this. They're training new exorcists all the time in Chicago, Rome, and Manila. Now there's well over 100 trained, and they can't keep up with demand. Another thing happened. I just saw this headline last month. Witchcraft is thriving in the U.S. with an expected 1.5 million Americans, more than the total number of Presbyterians, are now in this Wiccan church. Paganism is coming into our mainstream. So what's a thinking Christian to do if these UFOs and abductees are really demons taking on the form that our culture expects? What do we tell our kids and grandkids? Well, like I said, I'm a sci-fi movie fan, and how many of you saw Star Wars? The Empire Strikes Back. In that movie, Luke is getting trained by Yoda, right? To become a Jedi Knight and fight the dark side, right? And Luke asks a good question, because things are looking bad. The Empire is taken over. Darth Vader and company, right? The Sith Lords, the evil ones. And Luke asks Yoda, is the dark side stronger? And he's almost afraid of the answer. But Yoda says, no, quicker, more seductive, but not stronger. I think that's a pretty good answer, really, for us, because we have God's word to rely on. Romans 8:38-9 says, for I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. So we have the hope. Hang on to it. Trust your Bibles. Do your studies. Be involved. 1 John 4:4 says, dear children, you are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Wow. You've got the secret weapon. If you are a born-again Christian, he who is in you is greater than he's in the world. So put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. And he's a master of deception. He doesn't necessarily have to appear as a devil with red horns and a tail. He could be a nice alien that wants to help you. That's scary. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So my question for you tonight, I don't know most of you. Where are you? Is the light of life in you?
Amen.
Do you have the immunity to these schemes? If you have never done that, never made sure you're born again, as the way Jesus talks about in John. Born again, he said to Nicodemus, you must be born again. If you've never done that, I'd invite you to invite him into your heart. Ask him for forgiveness of sin. We all have a sin nature. And we need that forgiveness of sin. And he wants to unite us and make us back to the fellowship that we can have with him from the beginning, and which will be restored if you read your book, the end of your book of Revelation. So, somebody invited you tonight and you're not sure you're a Christian, talk to them. Talk to Ken or any of the other folks in the blue shirts, or your pastor. We got a couple of pastors here tonight. Invite Jesus into your life, because that is our only hope.
Yes, that's right.
And kids, if you're born again, you're growing in Christ, you are stronger.
Yes,
And all you have to do is call upon the name of Jesus in the day of trouble.
that's
Isn't that what the Bible says?
Yeah.
So good. Remember that. That's the core of this message, really. Now I got to make a commercial. I'm sorry. Okay. Can I make my commercial, or do you want to? Okay, I am leading, along with Eric Hovind and Russ Miller, who was here, a trip to the Grand Canyon, 4 days, 3 nights. Everything's included during that time period. You just got to get to Phoenix on a Thursday, and you could leave on Sunday. You could make it part of a longer vacation out west, or you can fly from Chicago relatively easily and not too expensively from Chicago O'Hare to Phoenix, and then you could take the hotel free shuttle to our hotel, and then we have a luxury bus. We get to go have lectures on the edge of the Grand Canyon and various sites. Russ will talk about what it's like, how you interpret these layers in light of Noah's flood, the biblical interpretation of the same evidence that other people talk about millions of years in. And then we'll see some various sites. We'll be up there. We'll spend the night in Page in another Hyatt Place hotel, a nice hotel. It's not roughing it, no tents. And then the next morning, we will do a 17-mile raft trip. I got flyers out there. You can pick these up. We'll do a 17-mile raft trip. It's no white water, so it's kid-friendly and it's elderly-friendly. We can all float on a raft together and enjoy what it's like being between 2,000-foot cliffs on either side of us. And then we'll finish in time for lunch, go back to Phoenix. If we have time and you have energy still, we can do another program. There will be teaching on the bus as well as in those hotels. And then Sunday morning, we can have a worship service and breakfast, or you can just leave if you got a flight or you want to drive somewhere else on your vacation. One of the DVDs out there, how many of you seen Genesis Paradise Lost? That's by Eric Hovind's group. He'll be with us on this trip. This is a neat 2-hour documentary with beautiful graphics of what the 6 days of creation might have looked like. And just amazing stuff. And then in between every of the days are several PhD scientists who describe from their point of view what that might have looked like and why they believe the Bible from their understanding of science in their own fields. I've got a lot of books out there. A few of this alien intrusion, which is a lot more than I could cover tonight. Got stuff for the kids as well. DVD of Evolution's Achilles Heels. If you don't have that, that thing is phenomenal, both the book and the DVD. And tonight for you, special, January special. Buy any 2 items and you get a 3rd item free. And of course, the least value of the 3 is the free one. But at least it's still free, right? And then I did mention the DVD. You want to do something else or do the questions? Okay.
Let's